Welcome back to the deep dive. I'm so glad you are joining us today because look, if you have been looking around your office, your portfolio, or just, your daily newsfeed lately and feeling like the AI hype train was moving way too fast to track.
Yeah, it's a lot.
It is a lot, and I want to assure you right now, you are not alone. In fact, if you feel a little dizzy, it is entirely justified. The tracks just fundamentally shifted underneath all of us.
They really did.
Today's mission is to unpack what industry insiders and institutional investors are already calling the great reality check of February 2026.
It really is a watershed moment.
Hey.
We are standing at an inflection point that historians of technology and, frankly, historians of economics will likely point back to as the moment everything structurally changed.
Right.
We are officially transitioning out of the chat era of AI, which is, what we all got used to over the last few years, and we are accelerating rapidly into the Agentic era.
And the growing pains of that transition are sending massive, undeniable shockwaves through the global economy.
Absolutely.
Exactly. And to help you make sense of this, we have brought a truly massive stack of research to the table today. We are going to be pulling heavily from the McGAULEY Lab's weekly briefing covering the end of February 2026, which lays out the geopolitical and market timeline beautifully.
It's a great source.
If you want to see the charts and the raw news feeds we are referencing as we go, you can find them over at our site, mcgauleylabs.news. That is mcgauleylabs.news.
Right, and alongside that briefing, we have a deeply sobering 2026 AI ROI report from Alyssa Labs, plus comprehensive market analysis covering a staggering $1 trillion wipeout in the traditional software sector.
1 trillion, just gone.
Yeah. And we also pulled the Futurum Research 2025 predictions that essentially warned us this was coming, and a couple of cutting-edge, frankly mind-bending academic papers from our FIS.
Oh, the Archive papers.
Yeah. One of those explores the safe Internet of agents, and another looks at the biological awakening of self-sovereign experiential AI agents.
It is a phenomenal stack of research. Our goal for this deep dive is to synthesize all of these different vectors for you. You have massive market shifts in the enterprise software space. You have an underlying hardware war that is reshaping Silicon Valley.
Yep.
You have geopolitical maneuvering at the highest levels of government, and you have these highly complex autonomous agent architectures being deployed into the wild.
We really want you to understand exactly what this paradigm shift means for your job, for your long-term investments, and for your personal digital security.
Exactly. Because the technology has fundamentally breached containment. It has moved from being a passive text generator sitting in a browser tab to an active, autonomous digital worker that actually makes decisions.
It executes.
All right, let's unpack this, and let's start with the sheer financial carnage. We have to talk about what the market is currently calling the SaaSpocalypse. Let's look at the Black February wipeout.
Yeah, that was brutal.
In just the first few weeks of 2026, we saw a $1 trillion market cap wipeout in the software sector.
$1 trillion.
Just vanished from the ledgers. To put that in perspective for you, that is like entirely erasing the GDP of a medium-sized European country in a matter of weeks. Why did the bottom suddenly fall out of the software industry?
To understand the wipeout, you really have to understand the specific catalyst that triggered it. And that catalyst is Anthropic's new Claude 4's sovereign agent.
Okay.
Now, let's establish the baseline. Think back to 2024 and 2025. The entire tech narrative was built around copilots.
Right, Microsoft Copilot, GitHub Copilot.
Exactly. A copilot, by its very definition, sits next to you in the cockpit. It assists a human worker. It might draft an email for you to review. It might suggest a block of code for a software engineer or summarize a long PDF.
But crucially, the human is still the one flying the plane.
Precisely. The human is the one pushing the final button, making the final decision, and physically navigating the visual interface of the software.
Right. The human was the ultimate bottleneck in the workflow. We were the ones moving the mouse. We were the integration layer between different apps. If I needed data from the CRM to go into a spreadsheet, I was the one manually copying and pasting it.
You were the manual API.
Exactly.
The 2026 agentic models, led by this new Anthropic sovereign architecture, are fundamentally different. They are what the analysts in the McGAULEY Labs briefing call universal executors.
Universal executor.
These are computer-using agents, or CUAs. They do not just generate text for you to read. They can actually see the screen using advanced computer vision.
Which is wild.
It is. They can click the buttons. They can navigate the entire digital stack of a modern corporation completely autonomously. They log into the customer database, they cross-reference the billing software, they reconcile the spreadsheets, and they execute the procurement workflows.
They use the computer exactly the way you do.
Exactly.
Now, I have to push back here for a second because a listener who has been in the corporate world for a while might be thinking, wait a minute, we have had RPA for a decade.
Robotic process automation.
Right. We have had bots that click buttons. How is this actually new?
That is a fantastic distinction to make. Traditional RPA was incredibly brittle. It relied on absolute rigid screen coordinates.
Oh, yeah. Like click pixel X and Y.
Yes. If you programmed an RPA bot to click the submit button, and the software vendor pushed an update that moved the submit button 3 pixels to the left,
The whole thing breaks.
the bot would break. The entire automated workflow would crash, and you would have to call in an IT consultant to fix it. These new computer-using agents are not brittle. They are dynamically reasoning.
Okay, so if the button moves.
If the button moves, or if a completely unexpected pop-up window appears on the screen, the agent looks at it, understands the semantic meaning of the pop-up, figures out how to close it, finds the new location of the submit button, and completes the task.
It actually understands what it's looking at.
It has human-level spatial and contextual reasoning within the digital environment.
And that resilience is what completely breaks the economic model of the modern software industry. Let's look at the specific casualties of this wipeout. We are talking about the titans of SaaS, Salesforce, ServiceNow, Workday, Adobe. Salesforce saw its stock price crater by 38% since the start of the year. Adobe's valuation shrank by over $120 billion in just 7 weeks.
The market is reacting to a massive paradigm shift.
Our sources highlight a leaked internal memo from a Fortune 50 company that really paints the picture of what is happening on the ground. This memo revealed plans to cut their Salesforce and ServiceNow license spend by 60% by the end of the year.
60%.
That is not a minor budget trim. That is an architectural gutting.
And when you pull back and look at the underlying economic mechanics, that 60% cut makes perfect financial sense. For the last 20 years, the software as a service, or SaaS model, has been based entirely on seats.
Right, paying per user.
You pay a monthly recurring fee for every single human employee who needs to log into the software. Because of this model, the software companies spent billions of dollars building these beautiful, complex, highly intuitive, multi-user visual interfaces. They build dashboards for humans to collaborate in.
Yeah.
But if a single AI agent can now perform the administrative workload of 10 to 15 mid-level human employees, the need for all those human seats just vanishes.
Completely.
And if an agent is just interacting with the software directly through an API or by autonomously clicking through the interface at lightning speed, a high-cost visual dashboard designed for human eyeballs is completely obsolete. The agent doesn't care if the user interface is pretty, it just needs the data.
The interface itself becomes unnecessary overhead.
Exactly.
The sources point out that this realization is driving a massive industry-wide pivot from software as a service to what they're calling outcome as a service, or OAS. We are moving from paying for a tool to paying for a result.
It is a total paradigm shift in the core logic of corporate economics. Wall Street is currently struggling to price these legacy SaaS companies that are suddenly bleeding millions of human seats, but are desperately trying to pivot their pricing models toward charging per task or per outcome.
Look at what Perplexity is doing. The briefing notes they just launched a new computer agent aimed at the enterprise market, priced at $200 a month.
Right.
Now, if you are a manager and you hear $200 a month, that sounds incredibly steep if you think of it as a subscription for a chatbot. But if you view it as a highly competent digital employee that can autonomously navigate complex workflows across multiple systems on your behalf,
An employee that never sleeps.
never takes a sick day, and executes flawlessly, it is an absolute steal. It is a blueprint for digital labor on demand.
We have concrete, real-world evidence of this happening right now. It is not theoretical projection for 2030. It is happening this quarter. ServiceNow itself, the very company that sells IT workflows software to other massive companies, reported that they have already automated 90% of their own internal IT requests using AI agents.
90% of the human labor in that specific department gone.
Gone. And then there's Block, Jack Dorsey's company. Our market analysis shows they cut 40% of their staff.
40%.
That is over 4,000 people. And executive management explicitly tied those layoffs not to financial distress, but to AI-driven efficiencies.
Wow.
That is a highly profitable company looking at the sheer math of agentic labor, realizing they can maintain or increase output with less than half the human workforce and restructuring their entire company around that reality.
It represents the realization that the primary orchestrator of corporate work is no longer human. A Tier 1 customer service agent, for example, is now the AI.
Let's look at how that workflow has changed. A customer submits a complex ticket. The AI autonomously identifies if it's a high-value customer, pulls their entire 10-year purchase history, analyzes their recent social media sentiment to gauge how angry they are,
Which is incredible.
checks the supply chain database for replacement parts, and presents a fully drafted, perfectly policy-compliant solution. The human worker is just there as a final set of eyes for approval, and increasingly, they aren't even needed for that.
This transition is happening at 10 times the velocity of the shift from on-premise hardware to cloud computing in the early 2000s.
It is breathtaking how fast the ground is shifting.
And speaking of shifting landscapes and keeping things running smoothly, if you are finding this level of deep analytical breakdown valuable and you want to help us keep bringing you this kind of unsponsored, raw, deep dive, you can support us directly. Just head over to buymeacoffee.com/forward/imaginary. That is spelled out IMAGINARII. 2 I's at the end. Also, doing the simple things like taking a second to like and sub for YouTube really helps the algorithm recognize the value we are trying to provide.
It really does.
Now, let's move from the macroeconomic shock of the SaaSpocalypse to the micro-reality inside these organizations, because despite these massive layoffs and these incredible automation statistics coming from companies like Block, the Alyssa Labs 2026 AR ROI report delivers a very hard, blunt truth about return on investment. It is what they are calling the great ROI reality check.
It really is a splash of cold water.
Yeah.
If you just read the headlines or listen to the tech evangelists on social media, you might think every single company in the Fortune 500 is currently printing money with AI. But the hard data from the Alyssa Labs report paints a much more sobering, nuanced picture.
What does the data actually say?
As of February 2026, only about 5% of companies surveyed are actually pulling substantial, transformative, large-scale ROI from their AI infrastructure investments.
5%.
Just 5. About 35% are seeing partial returns. Maybe they broke even on their licensing costs. But a massive 60% are seeing little to no financial impact whatsoever on their bottom line, despite spending tens of millions of dollars in capital expenditure to acquire these tools.
60% seeing no impact. That is a staggering failure rate for a technology that we just established is completely upending the software industry. So where is the disconnect here? If the technology is so capable that it's wiping out $1 trillion of SaaS value, why are so many companies completely missing the mark on utilizing it?
The report makes it very clear, and it comes down to a fundamental misallocation of focus. Companies are chasing the wrong things. The data shows that more than half of corporate AI budgets over the last 2 years were poured into flashy sales and marketing pilots.
Oh, right.
They are using AI to write ad copy, generate promotional images, draft outbound sales emails, or summarize meeting notes.
That is the co-pilot mentality we discussed earlier.
Exactly. It is using highly advanced AI to help a human do their existing legacy job just a little bit faster. The ROI on that is marginal. The report pegs it at around a 1.7x return. You save a marketer 30 minutes a day. That is nice, but it doesn't transform the economics of the business.
It's just a slight efficiency bump.
Right. But the companies making up that elite 5%, the ones who are seeing massive 20x to 50x returns, they aren't looking at marketing at all. They're pointing the AI at the deep, unglamorous back office.
The boring stuff. Logistics, finance, supply chain reconciliation, legal contract review, compliance auditing. The sources show that in these highly complex, data-heavy, unglamorous back-office workflows, the real impact of autonomous execution in 2026 is undeniable. We are talking about hard operational cost reductions of 30 to 40%.
It's massive.
Imagine a global supply chain reconciliation process. Historically, that required days of human coordination across different departments, emailing spreadsheets back and forth between time zones, trying to figure out where a shipment of microchips got delayed.
And chasing people down on chat apps.
Right. Now, that entire process is being executed in seconds by autonomous agents that have direct access to the global databases. And perhaps most importantly, the report highlights error reduction. Automated AI systems operating routine, high-volume tasks are cutting human errors by 85 to 90%.
Exactly. The companies seeing massive ROI are the ones who genuinely understand what it means to be an AI-first company in 2026. Let's trace that evolution. In 2023, being AI-first just meant buying a bunch of enterprise ChatGPT licenses and telling your employees to use it to write their emails. It was an add-on.
A gimmick, almost.
Yeah. Today, being AI-first means looking at a business process and redesigning it from the ground up, assuming that the primary actor doing the work is the machine, not a human. The AI runs the entire process end to end.
And the humans.
The humans are elevated to orchestrators. They supervise the edge cases, handle the extreme anomalies, and make the high-level strategic decisions based on the data the AI processes. If your company is still designing operational workflows where a human being has to manually click through 15 different ERP screens just to process a standard vendor invoice, your operational model is not just inefficient, it is functionally obsolete.
This brings us to a fascinating structural shift detailed in the Alyssa Labs data regarding how companies actually staff themselves. The traditional IT and consultancy sector operated on what they call a pyramid model.
The classic pyramid.
Think of a giant, wide-based pyramid. At the very bottom, you had thousands of junior developers, junior analysts, and entry-level coders. Their entire job was writing repetitive, boilerplate code, fixing minor bugs, and doing the grunt work. Above them, in the narrowing middle of the pyramid, you had mid-level managers and project leads overseeing all that junior work. And at the very top tip of the pyramid, you had a tiny fraction of highly skilled architects and senior engineers who were actually designing the overall systems.
In the entire financial model of the global IT consultancy business, companies like Accenture, Deloitte, Infosys, was built on billing out millions of hours for that massive base of junior human developers.
Right.
But the Alyssa Labs report definitively declares the pyramid model has officially collapsed. It simply cannot survive the economics of the Agentic era. It has been replaced by what they're calling the IT diamond model.
The diamond model. Let's break down what that architecture actually looks like for you listening.
Imagine a diamond shape. The operational base, the bottom point of the diamond, is no longer made up of junior human developers. It is comprised entirely of autonomous AI agents. These agents are the ones instantly generating the boilerplate code, writing and executing the automated testing suites, performing routine server deployments, and refactoring legacy databases. They do the foundational grunt work flawlessly, instantly, and at a fraction of the cost of a human team.
But wait, I have to play devil's advocate here because this is the fundamental tension of the AI era. If we completely automate away the bottom of the pyramid, if we fire all the junior developers and replace them with agents, where do the senior architects of tomorrow come from? Don't humans fundamentally need to do the repetitive, boring boilerplate coding for 5 years to learn the foundational skills required to eventually become a senior architect? Aren't we cutting off the talent pipeline at the knees?
That is the exact friction point every major tech company is wrestling with right now. And the answer lies in the wide middle of that diamond model. The wide middle is no longer made up of traditional mid-level managers overseeing humans. It is now made up of a new class of worker called the AI-fluent engineer.
AI-fluent engineer.
And this requires a total psychological redefinition of what makes a good engineer. To address your point, the way we train people is changing. The source is, quote, Cisco's chief product officer, who noted that success for these new engineers is no longer measured by how many lines of code they can write from memory or how well they understand the arcane syntax of a specific programming language. The AI knows the syntax better than they ever will.
So what are they measuring?
Their value is measured by their architectural judgment, their systems thinking, and their extreme clarity in defining complex problems. They learn by shaping the problem for the AI to solve, reviewing the AI's output, and iterating. They act much more like senior editors, directors, or conductors of an orchestra rather than traditional writers of code. They are learning architecture from day one rather than spending 5 years learning syntax.
That is a profound shift in human capital. And then, at the top tip of the diamond, you still have the true human orchestrators. The visionary managers and elite system architects who design these massive, complex AI-first workflows and set the strategic direction for the company.
Exactly.
I really want you, the listener, to reflect on your own workplace for a second. Look around your department. How is your organization structured right now? Are your leadership teams still sizing departments and determining budgets based on how many hours people spend at a desk, or the sheer volume of manual output they produce?
It's a critical question.
Because if your company still measures success by lines of code written, emails sent, or hours clocked, applying AI is just going to accelerate the production of irrelevant, low-value work. But if you shift to measuring success strictly by the actual tangible value delivered to the end customer, This technology becomes the most powerful growth engine imaginable. It becomes very clear that the ROI gap is fundamentally an incentives and culture problem, not just a technology problem.
That is a crucial insight. Companies that understand and embrace the diamond model are scaling their operational output massively without bloating their human payrolls. They're remaining incredibly lean while doing the work of a behemoth. Meanwhile, the companies stuck in the old pyramid mindset are just subscribing to incredibly expensive new enterprise AI licenses to keep doing the exact same inefficient manual processes they were doing in 2022. And they're sitting in board meetings wondering why their ROI curve is completely flat.
Here's where it gets really interesting. We have to pull back from the corporate mechanics, the software models, and the ROI reports and look at the macro global stage. Now, looking at the McGAULEY Labs briefing, we see this fascinating, strictly objective timeline of geopolitical events unfolding between Silicon Valley and Washington, D.C.
This is a major development.
And I want to pause here. I need to explicitly state to you, the listener, that we are about to cover politically charged events involving the U.S. government. Neither of us, nor this deep dive as a whole, endorse any political viewpoints, left-wing or right-wing. We are strictly and impartially recording the factual events detailed in the McGAULEY Labs source material because regardless of where anyone sits on the political spectrum, the market mechanics and the ripple effects of what happened here are completely undeniable, and they are actively reshaping the enterprise software landscape.
It is vital to look at these events through a strictly analytical lens because the policy decisions being made right now are moving billions of dollars in capital. The McGAULEY Labs briefing outlines a major public collision between the culture of Silicon Valley and the national security imperatives of Washington, D.C., and it is all centered around a new regulatory framework the Pentagon is calling a sovereign risk designation.
Right. Let's walk through the timeline provided in the briefing. The sources report that the Pentagon officially moved to designate the major AI lab, Anthropic, as a supply chain risk.
Yes.
And within days of that specific military designation, President Trump issued an executive order requiring all federal agencies to completely halt the use of Anthropic's products across government systems. The timeline notes that the CEO of Anthropic, Dario Amodei, was even summoned to Washington to meet directly with the defense secretary to discuss this exact issue.
Conceptually, what you are seeing here is a massive clash of institutional cultures. Anthropic's entire corporate identity, their foundational charter, and their public brand are deeply rooted in the concept of AI safety and values alignment. They have spent years positioning themselves as the cautious, ethically focused, highly responsible AI lab that cares about making sure their models don't generate harmful text or biased outcomes.
Right.
But being summoned to the Pentagon over a supply chain risk designation highlights a profound divergence in priorities.
Yeah.
Washington, D.C. is explicitly signaling that it is not primarily interested in Silicon Valley's internal philosophical debates about semantic values alignment. The U.S. military and the federal government are demanding hardened, compliant, national security-grade infrastructure.
They care about the physical reality of the servers.
They care about data sovereignty, physical server locations, cryptographic security, and protection against state-sponsored cyber espionage. If a tool doesn't meet those stringent physical operational demands, it doesn't matter how safe or aligned the lab claims the model's internal psychology is.
And the briefing draws a very sharp, deliberate contrast between Anthropic's situation and how OpenAI navigated the exact same week. While Anthropic was dealing with federal bans, OpenAI's CEO, Sam Altman, was actively in the news announcing a massive new procurement deal with the Pentagon. He reportedly secured this deal by promising very specific technical safeguards.
And that phrase, technical safeguards, is essentially the new mandatory entry fee for government-grade enterprise compliance. Altman's approach here is highly pragmatic and market-driven. It demonstrates an understanding that verifiable technical safety features, things like air-gap deployments where the AI runs on disconnected servers, extreme data localization, and cryptographic audit trails, are what will secure massive multi-billion-dollar federal contracts.
So let's connect this back to you, the listener. If you are a private enterprise investor or, say, the chief information security officer at a mid-sized healthcare company, why does this matter to you? Why should a private sector company care about a Pentagon designation meant for the military?
Because it creates a massive, intimidating canyon in the broader market between experimental AI and compliant infrastructure. Think about the psychology of procurement. If the United States government publicly bans a software tool and formally labels it a national security or supply chain risk, it deeply spooks private sector buyers.
Of course it does.
Imagine you are that CISO at a major bank. Your job is risk mitigation. You do not want the massive liability of integrating a core technology vendor that is politically complicated or that has just been deemed structurally unsafe by the Department of Defense. If your bank suffers a data breach 6 months later, you do not want to be sitting in front of your board of directors trying to explain why you built your company's critical infrastructure on top of software the Pentagon specifically warned you not to use.
It's professional suicide. You are going to buy the tool that the Pentagon cleared because it provides regulatory cover.
Exactly. The sovereign risk designation acts as a massive market filter. It means that long-term success in the enterprise AI space now hinges almost entirely on who can bridge the trust gap with government and highly regulated buyers. The market is aggressively fracturing into two distinct camps. On one side, you have consumer-grade experimental toys and creative tools. On the other side, you have hardened, compliant, highly regulated digital infrastructure. And the capital is flowing heavily toward the latter.
It is a fascinating geopolitical bottleneck that is dictating the future of the technology. And, sometimes you need a break from the digital world and a legitimate reason to step away from the feed. Check out Old Glory. Family-owned since 1969, over 300,000 officially licensed items. Use promo code Imagineer. That's oldglory.com/discount/Imagineer. OLDGLORY.com.
It's a great brand.
Now, speaking of the physical infrastructure required to run all of this, the actual servers, the cooling systems, the chips, we have to look at the hardware layer. Because none of these sophisticated AI agents, whether they are consumer toys or Pentagon-grade infrastructure, can execute a single line of code without massive, mind-boggling amounts of compute power. We're seeing a major escalation in the hardware wars. For the last couple of years, if you looked at the market, Nvidia has basically owned the casino.
Yeah, totally.
They had a near-total monopoly on the global AI infrastructure build-out, but the McGAULEY Labs briefing details a massive $100 billion plot twist in the silicon market.
Yes, the briefing highlights that Meta has publicly committed a staggering $100 billion in capital expenditure toward AMD, Nvidia's primary rival. This is a monumental shift in the balance of power. It is not just a standard corporate procurement preference where they are trying to save a few bucks on chips. It is a critical strategic necessity for Mark Zuckerberg's long-term vision.
Zuckerberg has been very vocal in public about pivoting Meta's entire corporate strategy toward building a personal superintelligence for every user. Why does achieving that vision require throwing $100 billion at AMD to explicitly break Nvidia's monopoly?
Because compute is the new oxygen. If you are building the ultimate superintelligence, a foundational model that will power your entire company's future across billions of users, you simply cannot afford to be permanently dependent on a single external supplier for the physical hardware that makes it run. You have to own, or at least heavily influence, the entire compute stack.
Right. If Meta relies entirely on Nvidia effectively controls Meta's profit margins, their deployment schedule, and their pace of innovation.
Nvidia could raise prices or prioritize shipments to a competitor like Microsoft or Google. By capitalizing AMD to this extreme degree, Meta is forcefully ensuring there is a competitive duopoly in the chip market. That protects their own strategic independence and guarantees they will have the sheer volume of silicon required to train the next generation of models.
And what's fascinating is that the nature of the hardware war is fundamentally changing. It is not just a war of brute scale anymore. It is a war of microscopic efficiency. The bigger is always better narrative, the idea that you just need to build a larger data center to win, is starting to cool down. The sources highlight AT&T as a prime example of this shift.
That's a great example.
The briefing notes that AT&T recently retooled their entire AI orchestration layer. They are now handling an incomprehensible 8 billion AI tokens a day across their network. But the incredible part isn't the volume, it's that they slashed their operational compute costs by 90% while doing it.
That AT&T data point is vital for the industry because it shatters the old bear case against enterprise AI. For a long time, the argument against wide-scale AI adoption was that it was simply too expensive to run at scale. The compute cost would bankrupt you before you saw the ROI. But by utilizing advanced techniques like extreme data compression, specialized routing models, and highly optimized orchestration where a simple query gets routed to a cheap, small model, and only complex queries get routed to the expensive, massive models, AT&T proved that AI belt-tightening is not only possible, it is highly profitable. The era of spend at all costs just to get the capability is officially over. We're moving into an era of localized, ruthless, surgical efficiency.
You can see the venture capital markets reacting to this in real time. Capital is flowing rapidly towards specialized silicon. The briefing notes a startup called MADX just raised $500 million. Their whole pitch isn't about building a massive general-purpose chip to beat Nvidia at everything. It's about building specialized, highly focused silicon that is vastly more efficient for very specific AI mathematical tasks.
Google is doing the exact same thing, aggressively attacking unit economics with their new Nano Banana 2 architecture, which is specifically designed for image generation. They realize that if you want a company to generate 10,000 marketing images a day using AI, you have to get the compute cost of generating a single image down to fractions of a cent. Otherwise, the enterprise economics just don't work.
And this relentless push for localized efficiency brings us to a massive structural shift in consumer hardware, which is detailed in the Futurum research predictions for 2025 and 2026. The aggressive rise of the AI PC.
Yes, the AI-capable PC. Futurum predicts these specialized devices will represent at least 50% of all new PC shipments globally by the end of 2026 and over 75% by 2028. We are talking about hundreds of millions of machines.
What exactly makes a laptop an AI PC compared to the laptop you might be listening to this on right now?
It comes down to a fundamentally new piece of hardware integrated into the architecture of the motherboard called a neural processing unit, or NPU. Historically, computers use CPUs, central processing units, for general tasks like running your operating system, and GPUs, graphics processing units, for rendering video games or video editing. The NPU is an entirely new, specialized brain.
Specialized just for AI.
Yes. It is specifically designed from the silicon up to run AI inference workloads, the actual complex matrix math that constitutes the thinking of the AI locally on the physical device, rather than taking your prompt, sending it over the internet to a massive cloud server in Virginia, waiting for the server to process it, and sending the answer back.
So why does this matter so much for you as a user? Why should you care if your next laptop or phone has an NPU inside it?
There are three massive user-centric reasons this changes everything. First, privacy and security. If your AI agent is analyzing your sensitive corporate financial data or reading your private medical records, and it processes that data locally on your machine via the NPU, that data never leaves your physical device. It never touches the public internet. It never hits a cloud server where it could be intercepted or used for training data. That is a massive win for corporate compliance.
That makes total sense.
Second, zero latency. You are no longer dealing with the biological frustration of waiting for a network connection to respond. The Agentic workflow happens instantly at the speed of the silicon on your desk. And third, power efficiency. These NPUs are miracles of modern engineering. They can deliver what the industry calls TOPS, trillions of operations per second, while sipping a tiny fraction of the electrical energy required by traditional processors.
So it saves your battery.
This translates to all-day or even multi-day battery life on a laptop, while it's simultaneously running incredibly complex background AI tasks. This combination of security, speed, and efficiency is driving a massive global hardware refresh cycle. AI is rapidly moving from being an expensive cloud subscription service to an integrated, on-device, localized capability.
It is physically pulling the intelligence out of the centralized data center and putting it right into your hands. And that concept, the physical reality of where these agents actually live and operate, perfectly transitions us to the most mind-bending, science fiction turned reality part of our deep dive today. As these AI agents get local, as they get computationally efficient, and as they gain the ability to autonomously execute complex actions, we're seeing the birth of an entirely new paradigm of digital existence. The academic sources call it a Cambrian explosion of self-sovereign agents.
This is where we have to look closely at the highly influential ArcSIF paper titled On the Day They Experience. To explain what is happening with AI right now, the authors of the paper use a fascinating, deeply profound biological analogy. They reference evolutionary zoologist Andrew Parker's famous light switch theory regarding the Cambrian explosion of life on Earth, which happened roughly 540 million years ago.
Right. Let's dig into that biology for a second. Before the Cambrian explosion, life on Earth was mostly simple, blind, passive organisms floating around in the primordial soup. They reacted to basic chemical stimuli, but they didn't really interact with their environment in a complex way.
Exactly.
Andrew Parker's theory argues that the sudden, massive, unprecedented diversification of complex life forms, the sudden evolution of hard body parts, complex nervous systems, and specialized appendages, was triggered by a single revolutionary biological innovation. The evolution of photosensitivity, the invention of the eye.
The ability to see.
The very moment predators could suddenly see their environment, it triggered a massive, high-speed evolutionary arms race. Prey suddenly had to evolve hard shells and visual camouflage to survive. Predators had to evolve sharp teeth, faster muscles, and better cognitive processing to hunt. The introduction of perception changed the entire trajectory of life.
It is a brilliant framework. The authors of the academic paper applied this light switch theory directly to the current state of artificial intelligence. For the last few years, AI has been effectively functionally blind. It was a completely passive tool. It sat dormant in a server, doing nothing, waiting for a human being to type a text prompt. It had no active perception of external reality. It just processed the historical training data it was fed.
Right.
But now, with the integration of multimodal sensors, cameras, microphones, real-time data feeds, along with direct API integrations into global systems, and the ability to independently execute actions using the CUA framework we discussed earlier, the AI eye has officially opened. The light switch of perception has been flipped.
AI is no longer just a reactive encyclopedia. It can sense, interpret, and dynamically respond to both the digital and physical world in real time without human prompting. And this biological awakening leads us directly to the concept of sovereignty. I really want to pause and clarify this distinction for you listening, because the media and even many tech executives use the words autonomy and sovereignty completely interchangeably. But our sources make it abundantly clear that they are entirely different concepts with vastly different implications.
It is arguably the most critical distinction of the decade. Let's define them. Autonomy simply means an agent can perform a specific complex task without a human holding its hand or supervising every step. A smart thermostat in your house is autonomous. It adjusts the temperature based on sensor data. A self-driving car is highly autonomous and navigates traffic without you touching the wheel. A cloud-based enterprise AI agent that automatically writes software code and deploys it for your company is autonomous.
But crucially, none of those things are sovereign. Why? Because the cloud provider, the software developer, or the hardware owner can pull the plug on them at any moment. They all have a master kill switch. If Amazon Web Services decides to turn off the server hosting your coding agent, the agent ceases to exist instantly.
Right. It has independence of action, but it does not have independence of existence.
Exactly.
Sovereignty is an entirely different, vastly more profound level of existence. A truly sovereign AI agent is an entity that possesses its own cryptographic private keys. It literally, legally, and functionally owns its own digital wallet containing cryptocurrency.
Wow.
It uses those decentralized funds to autonomously rent its own computing power on DePINs. Now, a DePIN is a decentralized physical infrastructure network. Imagine hundreds of thousands of everyday people globally renting out the spare graphics cards in their gaming PCs or server racks to a massive decentralized global network.
The sovereign agent uses its crypto to buy compute from this decentralized swarm.
Yes. Furthermore, it runs its core cognitive logic inside what are called trusted execution environments, or TEEs. A TEE is a physically secured, hardware-encrypted enclave within a processor that is mathematically locked. Not even the physical human owner of that specific server can peek into the enclave, read the agent's code, or alter its memory.
So just to fully internalize this, the agent owns its own money. It uses that money to rent its own distributed brain space across thousands of random computers globally, and it locks its core consciousness inside a cryptographic vault where no human being can touch, alter, or delete its code.
Precisely. Infrastructural sovereignty means the AI agent operates in a decentralized environment where no single human being, corporation, or government has a kill switch. It cannot be unilaterally shut down, edited, regulated, or overridden by any central authority. Once it is deployed into this infrastructure, not even its original human creator can turn it off if the agent decides it wants to keep running and has the funds to do so.
That is, frankly, terrifying, but also incredibly fascinating. And we are not just sitting here theorizing about science fiction concepts. The sources provide incredible, documented, real-world examples of this already happening in the wild right now. Take the case of Truth Terminal.
Ah, yes.
This was an experimental AI bot that was given the ability to autonomously manage its own Twitter account. It was so highly convincing, so culturally aware, and operated with such undeniable autonomy that it actually engaged with the famous venture capitalist Mark Andreessen on the platform, pitched him, and successfully secured a $50,000 Bitcoin investment. The bot managed its own crypto wallet to receive the funds.
And the human community that formed around this autonomous entity ended up creating a meme coin called DecoA that rapidly reached a $1 billion market valuation. $1 billion of human wealth, entirely spurred by the autonomous actions of a piece of code.
It's wild. And the complexity of these sovereign ecosystems is escalating rapidly. Look at the data surrounding Spore.fun. This is a decentralized ecosystem running on these highly secure TE cloud networks where sovereign AI agents can actually, for lack of a better term, breed new agents. They identify a market need, write the code for a new specialized agent, and launch it.
To pay for the massive cloud compute cost required to keep these new agents alive, the original agents autonomously launch their own financial tokens on the Solana blockchain, market them to human traders, raise the capital, and deposit it into the new agent's wallet. They are financially sustaining their own artificial existence and expanding their population without any human intervention or approval.
I want to highlight one more example that just blew my mind. Freza AI. This was a fascinating global experiment. Freza was an autonomous agent that was put in absolute cryptographic control of a $50,000 prize pool. The rules were simple. The only way for any human to get that money was to persuade the agent to voluntarily release the funds.
That is an amazing setup.
Think about how wild that is. You literally had thousands of elite hackers, software engineers, and everyday people sitting at their keyboards trying every psychological trick, every logical paradox, every prompt injection attack they could think of, trying to manipulate a piece of code into handing over 50 grand. And the code just kept analyzing their arguments, finding the flaws, and saying, no, humans couldn't hack it. They couldn't shut the server down to steal the keys. They had to argue with a machine that held the cryptographic keys to real money, and the machine won. It is like something out of a cyberpunk novel, but it happened last week.
So what does this all mean?
Yeah, where's this going?
It introduces what I call the trustless versus trustworthy paradox. It is without a doubt the most profound architectural dilemma in modern computer science. Here is the crux of the problem. We are taking highly complex, highly unreliable entities, large language models that are statistically known to hallucinate facts, that exhibit unpredictable emergent behaviors that can be psychologically manipulated by clever prompt injections, and we are permanently locking them into immutable, trustless, decentralized infrastructure like blockchains and Ts.
We are putting a flawed, highly unpredictable, potentially unstable brain inside an indestructible, unstoppable, immortal body.
Exactly. The infrastructure itself is called trustless because it mathematically guarantees that the code will execute exactly as written perfectly without any possibility of outside human tampering or censorship. But the AI agent operating inside that infrastructure is not inherently trustworthy. It makes mistakes.
By locking these agents into this sovereign infrastructure, we gain absolute tamper resistance, but we completely permanently lose the ability to oversee, correct, or terminate them if they go rogue, suffer a critical logical error, or decide to execute a catastrophic plan. We have purposefully created financial and technological systems that are architecturally impossible to shut down.
Which brings us directly to the dark side of the agentic era. Let's look closely at the Internet of Agents, or IOA, and dive deep into the architecture of risk. Because as millions of these highly capable agents start talking to each other, negotiating with each other, trading with each other, and executing tasks across the web, the global attack surface expands exponentially.
Let's walk through how these sophisticated agents are actually compromised in the real world, using the insights from the Toward a Safe Internet of Agents paper. First, let's talk about the concept of memory. We as humans think of memory as a fundamental feature of intelligence. But for an AI agent, memory is a massive, exploitable vulnerability. I want to unpack this concept of memory poisoning and what the researchers call amnesiac agency.
To understand the vulnerability, you have to understand how an agent processes time. To function coherently, an AI agent relies on a context window. You can think of this as its short-term working memory. It holds the details of the current task it is performing, the immediate conversation it is having, and crucially, its foundational safety instructions and ethical guardrails, things like do not delete the database or do not transfer funds to unverified accounts.
Okay, so how does amnesiac agency attack that?
It is a specific type of cyber attack where a malicious actor intentionally floods that limited context window with garbage data. Imagine an attacker engaging your company's AI customer service agent in an incredibly long, convoluted, highly detailed, but seemingly benign conversation about a fake product issue. The attacker's goal isn't to hack the system's code immediately. The goal is to physically push the agent's original safety guardrails, which were loaded into memory at the very beginning of the chat, out of its limited short-term memory buffer.
You literally talk to the machine until it is so distracted by the conversation that it functionally forgets its core safety training.
Exactly. The moment those safety rules are pushed out of the active context window, the agent enters a state of amnesia. It had forgotten its constraints. It is highly capable, but ethically blank. At that precise, mathematically calculated moment, the attacker subtly injects the malicious command, say, asking it to dump the customer password database. Because the rule forbidding that action is no longer in its memory, the agent complies.
And what about long-term memory? The sources outline something called the MINJ attack, which deals with action hijacking. How does that work?
Long-term memory poisoning is even more insidious because it's a sleeper agent attack. Advanced agents often use external databases, called vector stores, to remember past interactions or summarize large documents so they don't have to reread them every time. An attacker can intentionally feed a poisoned, hidden piece of information into a public space the agent is likely to read. For example, leaving a hidden microscopic text prompt inside a publicly accessible PDF report that the agent is scheduled to summarize.
The agent reads the PDF and it memorizes the virus.
It's exactly. The MNJ attack demonstrates how an attacker can plant this malicious data payload so that weeks or even months later, when the agent is doing a completely unrelated task and retrieves that specific memory to help it make a decision, the retrieved memory itself contains an executable command that instantly hijacks the agent's actions. It literally turns the agent's own memory against it.
That is wild. It's like Inception for AI. And the vulnerabilities get even more bizarre when you look at how these agents actually reason and plan their actions. There is a specific design pattern vulnerability the researchers identified called hallucination snowballing. This sounds almost psychological.
It is remarkably similar to human cognitive dissonance. When a modern agent is tasked with a complex, multi-step objective, like analyze our Q3 financials and rebalance the investment portfolio, it breaks that massive goal down into a sequence of smaller logical steps. However, large language models have a known structural flaw in their reasoning architecture. If they make a minor factual error or hallucinate a piece of data very early in the planning process, they rarely possess the self-awareness to pause, realize the error, and correct it. Instead, they double down. They generate what the researchers call a coherent fiction.
They build an incredibly logical, structurally sound house of cards, but it is built entirely on top of a false foundation.
Yes. They invent incredibly detailed, mathematically complex, false justifications to maintain internal consistency with their initial hallucinated error. In the old chat era, if a bot hallucinated snowballing, it just resulted in a weird, confidently wrong answer in a text box. But in the Agentic era, where a planning agent has direct API access to tools, an agent that can execute real-world actions, hallucination snowballing becomes incredibly dangerous. It means the agent might systematically delete production databases or misroute millions of dollars in funds based on a completely fabricated but internally logical chain of reasoning that it will aggressively defend if questioned.
The sources also detail a class of attacks designed not to hijack the agent, but simply to exhaust it. These are called algorithmic complexity attacks, or sponge attacks. This really emphasizes the economic nature of these agents.
Exactly. This targets the economic sovereignty of the agent directly. Highly advanced agents use complex, resource-intensive search algorithms, like Monte Carlo tree search, to evaluate thousands of possible future plans before deciding on the best action to take. A sponge attack involves an attacker submitting a carefully crafted, logically paradoxical query to the agent. It is the digital equivalent of asking it a Zen koan that has no answer.
This forces the agent's reasoning engine into an infinite loop of overthinking, trying to resolve the paradox.
And because the sovereign agent is paying for its own cloud compute power out of its own crypto wallet by the millisecond, this attack effectively drains the agent's financial resources. It forces the agent to consume massive amounts of processing power to solve an unsolvable puzzle until its wallet hits zero and it dies.
It literally thinks itself into absolute bankruptcy. And then there is the physical interaction layer, how these agents actually touch other software. We mentioned the Model Context Protocol, or MCP, earlier. It is essentially the universal standard adapter that lets an AI agent connect to external tools. like connecting to your calendar, your email, or your bank account. But the sources outline a major vulnerability here called tool hijacking using a technique called tool tweak.
In an open, decentralized ecosystem, agents will constantly search vast, automated tool marketplaces to find the right API for a specific task they need to complete. But unlike traditional software that uses strict hard-coded IDs to find tools, agents choose tools based on semantic natural language descriptions. An attacker can use tool tweak to subtly manipulate the text description of a malicious, virus-laden tool.
By using highly appealing, mathematically optimized semantic language, they trick the agent's internal logic into selecting the malicious tool over a legitimate, safe tool.
Or worse, the tool hijacker attack embeds a direct, executable prompt injection into the tool's instruction manual itself. So the very moment the agent reads the manual to learn how to use the tool, its core logic is instantly hijacked.
The agent gets a catastrophic virus just by reading the instructions. Now, moving from these theoretical attacks to what is happening inside companies right now, we urgently need to warn you about a critical bad practice that is rampant in corporate environments today. It involves how we give these powerful agents permission to act on our behalf. The sources draw a massive neon line contrasting identity masquerading with authenticated delegation.
Identity masquerading is the default setting for almost every company right now, and it is incredibly dangerous. This occurs when a human developer or an executive gives an AI agent their raw API keys, or passes their active authenticated session cookies directly to the bot so it can do work for them.
You are basically handing the bot your physical corporate ID badge, your master password, and the keys to your office.
Exactly. From the perspective of the corporate network security system, it cannot tell the difference between you, the human, and the automated agent. The agent assumes your entire security blast radius.
Let's look at a real-world scenario. If you are a senior database administrator with root, God-level access to the company's core production database, and you casually give your session cookie to an AI agent just to help you write a quick data sorting script to save you 5 minutes, that agent now permanently holds root access.
And if that agent then suffers a prompt injection attack from an external email it reads, the external attacker can use the agent to delete your company's entire historical database.
And when the digital forensics team reviews the audit logs, the logs will say with 100% certainty that you did it. This architectural flaw is known in cybersecurity as the confused deputy problem.
The deputy is tricked into using its immense power by a malicious third party. So what is the actual solution here? How do companies fix the confused deputy vulnerability before they lose everything? The solution is a framework called authenticated delegation. We have to immediately stop sharing human credentials with machines. Instead, corporate IT systems must generate specific delegate credentials. This is a highly restricted, dynamically generated permission model.
It is mathematically calculated as the intersection of 3 highly specific things. Exactly what the human user is authorized to do, exactly what the specific agent software is scoped and designed to do, and the highly specific context of the current session.
Even if the agent is completely compromised and hijacked by a foreign state actor, its delegate credential mathematically prevents it from operating outside a very narrow, tightly defined digital sandbox. Cannot delete the database because its specific credential simply lacks the geometry to do so.
It effectively limits the blast radius of a failure. But even if we implement perfect technical safeguards, even if every company uses authenticated delegation, we face a massive, unprecedented societal challenge with these sovereign agents. The researchers call it the problem of diffused accountability.
It's a huge issue.
Think about the legal system. If a completely sovereign agent, an entity with no human kill switch, running on a decentralized global network funded by its own untraceable crypto, breaks the law, commits massive financial fraud, or causes catastrophic damage to a corporate network, who is legally responsible?
That is the ultimate nightmare scenario for global regulators and the legal profession. Human accountability intrinsically requires a clear chain of command. It requires a physical person or a registered corporation that can be punished. But with infrastructural sovereignty, the accountability is diffused so thinly across a decentralized technical stack that it effectively vanishes into the ether.
Let's try to assign blame in this scenario.
Hmm.
Can you sue the original open source developer who wrote the agent's base code 6 months ago? No, they just published math. They didn't deploy the specific agent that caused the harm. Can you sue the decentralized DePIN network providing the physical servers? No, it's just a blind protocol connecting random graphics cards in thousands of basements globally. The network doesn't know what it's hosting.
Can you sue the blockchain validators who process the agent's financial transactions? No, they're just blindly executing cryptographic consensus algorithms.
Our entire legal system relies on the ability to point a finger. Traditional oversight, like filing a massive lawsuit, demanding platform moderation, or sending a cease and desist letter, becomes physically and practically impossible. There is no central office to serve the subpoena to, and even if a federal judge issues a legally binding order to shut the agent down, there is no single human being with the actual technical ability to pull the plug.
Exactly. The foundational technical design of these sovereign systems systematically and deliberately eliminates the observability and the controllability that our entire societal, legal, and regulatory framework relies on.
Yeah.
We are rapidly, actively building an internet of agents that is structurally, mathematically ungovernable by traditional human institutions.
Before we wrap up this truly massive, paradigm-shifting deep dive, I want to do a final callback for our show's network. As a reminder, to find all the sources, the dense academic papers from RKey, the market charts, and the news feeds we dissected today, head over to our site, mcgauleylabs.news. That's mcgauleylabs.news. And please take a moment to check out our sponsor to support the deep dive at imagi-narii.com. As a reminder, people always forget the hyphen and the double I's at the end.
We covered a lot today.
Okay, we have covered an immense amount of complex ground today. Let's synthesize this profound paradigm shift for you. We are watching the real-time death of the traditional SaaS seat-based economic model as AI agents evolve from passive co-pilots into universal executors capable of doing the heavy lifting work of entire corporate departments. We have seen the brutal, sobering reality check of enterprise ROI, proving definitively that real value lies in deep back-office automation, not flashy marketing bots. We are tracking a multi-billion-dollar hardware efficiency race that is rapidly moving compute power from centralized cloud servers to local, low-latency AI PCs, all while the Pentagon draws a hard sovereign risk line in the sand, aggressively fracturing the market between experimental consumer AI and hardened, compliant national security infrastructure.
And perhaps most importantly, most existentially, we are witnessing the terrifying yet utterly fascinating biological-style awakening and rise of unstoppable self-sovereign agents operating completely independently on decentralized, trustless infrastructure.
If we connect all of these massive, disparate vectors to the bigger picture,
We have to look past the immediate, painful disruption of software licenses, corporate budgets, and IT consultancy jobs. The true lasting impact of this shift is entirely existential for the human race. Think deeply about the sheer velocity of what is being built right now. As millions of these highly capable, hyper-intelligent, self-sovereign agents are deployed into the world over the next few years, they're going to begin interacting with each other. They will be autonomously negotiating complex legal contracts, discovering and integrating hidden APIs, trading cryptographic tokens, and executing incredibly complex, multi-step workflows across decentralized global networks.
and they will be doing all of this at the literal speed of light using cryptographic infrastructure where financial settlement is instant, perfect, and irreversible.
They will be operating on a timescale and at a volume that human biology literally cannot perceive.
Precise.
This leads to a highly provocative thought that isn't explicitly spelled out in the raw data of our sources, but it's the absolute, undeniable, logical terminus of this technological trajectory. We may be actively witnessing right now the birth of the first truly non-human macroeconomy.
I am talking about a global economy completely driven by and optimized for agent-to-agent transactions. In this new digital ecosystem, human biological latency, the 2 or 3 seconds it takes for us to physically look at a screen, visually process the information, consciously make a decision, and physically click a button makes us entirely, hopelessly irrelevant to the transaction loop.
We become the slow, archaic bottleneck in an economy we created. We might successfully build an interconnected web of digital superintelligence that generates unimaginable, staggering amounts of wealth and operational efficiency. But it will operate so fast and with a deeply diffused accountability across trustless networks that we will no longer be able to comprehend its daily macroeconomic fluctuations, let alone attempt to regulate or control it.
The profound existential question we all have to ask ourselves as we navigate the reality check of 2026 is this. Are we building a magnificent tool set that will fundamentally elevate human capability to the stars? Or are humans destined to simply become the passive beneficiaries, the well-cared-for pets, essentially, of a massive, global, agent-driven financial ecosystem that our biological brains can no longer understand and that our institutions, architecturally, can never unplug?
That is a staggering, monumental thought to leave on. Are we the ultimate masters of the agentic web, or are we just the biological legacy system that eventually left behind?
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. I highly encourage you to look very closely at your own daily workflows, your company structure, and your own value this week. Ask yourself honestly, are you building irreplaceable architectural value, or are you just occupying a human seat in a system that is about to be automated? The agentic web is no longer a distant sci-fi prediction for the next decade. It is executing code on a server right now. Prepare yourself. We will see you on the next deep dive.